Hello. This is the second part of a two-part series. If you haven't watched the first one, I suggest doing so, cause I don't want to repeat the introduction. So in the last video, I talked about some unconventional dragons that were either the only ones, or one of a few individuals in their stories. This part is about unconventional dragons in universes where there's large groups of them. These dragons can all be of the same species or type, but won't always be. I'm not sure how to describe it without spoilers. Also, the rules are the same as the first video. So without further ado, let's begin. So first up we got the dragons of Kenan Taylor's Chimera. Because God forbid I go one video without mentioning that setting. These dragons are unconventional both because of their appearance, and their lore. Like every animal on Chimera, they evolved from prehistoric Earth animals that arrived on that planet via magic. Now this being Chimera, and these being dragons, you'd expect them to have evolved from some species of reptile. In fact, making them descendants of a dinosaur like Yichi was such a low-hanging fruit I'd call it pumpkin. But they're not. They're actually venomous therocephalians. Complete with an evolutionary tree to show how their ancestors became arboreal, then gliding, then finally volant. Having the dragons be non-mammalian therapsids allows for really interesting combinations of features. The horned, vaguely canine head, is very reminiscent of Eastern dragons, while their body is clearly inspired by European dragons. And both of those traits together, echo the depictions of dragons from medieval bestiaries. And yes, I'm fond of those too. They also spit poison instead of fire. Not unheard of in dragons, but certainly less common. Next, I will briefly mention the dragon-type Pokemon, from Pokemon. They are very cool, but most of the things I could say about those would be just me repeating the intro of part 1. Game Freak understood the assignment perfectly. They made dragons a literal type of monster. Just like grass, bug, fairy, and ghost. Because that's what dragons are. They're not a species of monster, they are a type of monster. And since there's so many of them, there's gotta be something for everyone. Similar to Pokemon, and yet opposite in many ways, we have the universe of Monster Hunter. As I've said a few times in social media before, in Monster Hunter there are many species of dragon, but Fatalis is the dragon. It sounds paradoxical, and it is, but it will make sense if you think about it. You see, despite the name, the monsters in Monster Hunter aren't actually monsters. They are just weird, overpowered animals, that form a strange ecosystem. In fact, Creature Hunter would have been a much more fitting title, but it doesn't sound as good. What we refer to as species of dragon in that game series are mostly reptilian megafauna that form the dominant clades of their respective ecosystems. But they are still as much part of those ecosystems as the mammals and insects they live alongside with. They make nests, they hunt prey, they fight for territory, they attract mates, they sleep, they flock. All except for one species. And it is that one species that I decided to put on this entry. In fact, I almost included it in part 1 before remembering that there's multiple individuals with growth stages and everything. Fatalis has no canon interactions with any other monster, except maybe Lao Shen Lung. It just shows up out of nowhere, fights the hunters, and then disappears just as mysteriously. It basically is to hunters what the hunters are to the other monsters. It also may or may not be able to mess with people's minds. Which is honestly something we need more of in fiction. The only other example I know is that one dragon from the Silmarillion. But back to Fatalis. It is such a classic fairytale dragon that it loops back around into being unconventional. Especially in comparison to all the other so-called monsters in Monster Hunter. The next entry is one you probably haven't heard of. The Acceleration by the Brackenbard has some of the coolest, and scariest dragons I've ever seen. In that universe, animals can undergo a number of different mutations. Giants are animals that grow to unnatural sizes, but otherwise stay the same. Fae are animals that develop sapience, but stay at more or less people sizes. And dragons are animals that both grow to massive sizes, and develop sapience. Oh, also they form cults that worship them like gods. Those dragons can be any kind of animal. From dogs to crabs to frogs. But by far the most common are bird dragons. Now birds are already creepy as they are, so them being gigantic and sapient makes them terrifying. The video A Meeting with the Dragon, a world-building short story, has one of the freakiest dragon encounters I've ever seen in all media. And it's not some eldritch monster or anything. It's just a massive, intelligent seagull that acts like a mafia boss. There's also an owl dragon that demands blood sacrifices and looks straight up unholy, as well as a peacock dragon that's basically the god emperor of Dune, possessing lost knowledge and guiding his followers with cryptic instructions. No flying lizard with digestion problems could ever freak me out the way these guys do. And now for the final entry. I know I've said this isn't a ranking, but I wanted to save the coolest for last. And there was never a doubt in my mind as to which dragons would get this spot. Well, I'm not even sure what they are called exactly. I'll just call them antediluvian monsters for now. Because that's the term Dr. Polaris used in his video, Antediluvian Monsters, A Brief History of Early Paleo Art. As well as the videos, Antediluvian, Animation Short Film, and Antediluvian, Mary Anning's Prologue, by Mario Lanzas. Basically the very first depictions of Mesozoic reptiles. I'm talking those from the 1700s to 1800s. Before even the retrosaurs. For context, there was a time when Western philosophers began examining the world more scientifically, but still hadn't let go of their religious and cultural biases. That led to many of those fossils being interpreted as proof of real-life dragons. And that is why these dragons are my favorite. Because, for a brief period in history, they managed to be real. No other dragon has done that, and I assume none ever will. The prologue with Mary Anning sums up really well what it must have felt like to discover those fossils at the time. Picture this. You are a scientist studying the natural world. You are religious, but you aren't a Bible literalist. You know that the sea dragons mentioned in the Old Testament are just myths, as they show similarities to those of other mythologies from around the world. Furthermore, you know that the world is a little bit older than 6,000 years, because that's when the oldest human civilizations you are aware of rose up. There's absolutely zero reason to think the world is any older than that. You also hear some woke environmental activists say something about animals going extinct. But you are hesitant to listen to them. Your sources say that there is no evidence for extinction, and if there is, then it's definitely not caused by humans. Sure, some animals that you find the bones of haven't been found in the flesh, but those are just giant versions of animals you know. So they could have just shrunk generation by generation. Then one day, you find the bones of a creature that look like nothing you've ever seen before. A little weird, but there are hypotheses trying to explain it. Then more and more of those fossils show up. A whole ecosystem of completely alien species. Eventually you can no longer deny the realization that what you thought about reality was wrong. Turns out the world is orders of magnitude older than you thought, and that the age of man is but a tiny chapter in it. Not only that, but before the creatures you know, there were others, that look suspiciously like the antediluvian dragons of old creation myths. Primordial biblical monsters, the remains of which you are now holding in your hands. That's straight up Lovecraftian. The closest thing real life has ever been to cosmic horror. Like, imagine if you wake tomorrow and you find out that gravity doesn't actually work the way we thought. What else can I say? This is the only instance of actual mythological dragons, 100% proven to be real. We got all kinds of things called dragons IRL. From lizards, to fish, to insects, to slugs, to fruit. But none of them feels like a dragon. They all feel like dragon-themed things. So that's it for this video. I got carried away once again and made this super long. but it was something I was really excited to talk about. I'm not sure how to close as always, so I'll just say that I have a lot of plans for future videos and leave it there. Goodbye.